inspired by kingdom principles that work for you.
Thank you for joining us at Forward, Upward, Onward Together as a part of RBNTV. In this show, we discuss topical and national issues and the many solutions that we have to solve them. We know that our prospects are many, even in a COVID Bahamas or in a post-COVID Bahamas. We'll talk about what that'll look like. And so I'm so excited for the many guests that we have today. I am equally as excited to talk with our guests today. You may have watched Jaws, you may have watched The Shallows. We're going to talk sharks and sharks in the Bahamas. And so our guest is a dynamic researcher and conservationist. She's currently a PhD student at the Florida International University studying predator ecology. She spent 2 years at the KP Luther Institute studying and researching sharks. Her current research focuses on the population of sharks and large predators within the islands of the Bahamas. And so please join me in welcoming Candace Fields. Candace, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and talk with you today.
So tell us, how did you get into marine biology and sharks?
Well, I mean, for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a marine biologist. I didn't necessarily know what that meant, but in my mind, that meant I could play in the ocean all day, which seemed very enticing to me. And, I didn't necessarily, my education doesn't necessarily reflect that. I went to Lafayette College and I graduated there in 2017 with a degree in neuroscience. And so I guess I'm straying quite far from my educational path there, but back to my passion, really.
Yeah, a lot of us have been introduced to sharks through, the Jaws movie series. More recently, there was a movie called The Shallows. Great movie, but people are terrified of sharks. Is this really fair?
I mean, I think, like you said, that most people's perception of sharks, which are just amazing animals, is from the media, right? So we're only seeing, or it's only being portrayed, oh, shark attack on this beach, or, this surfer got bumped by a shark and barely made it out alive. And these narratives are just very negative for sharks. But you have to kind of also think about the fact that, well, we as humans are entering the home of a shark, right? The ocean really belongs to them. And so I think also, like, beyond that, because people haven't had the personal interaction, they haven't necessarily been in the water with a shark, they've only seen a shark on TV, they haven't been able to experience personally the kind of majestic, graceful, kind of peaceful elements of just having a shark swim by you.
Well, I don't know too many people who would describe a shark as peaceful, maybe majestic, but I don't know about peaceful.
Yeah,
and so
it's peaceful when you just, it's just you and silence and just majesty.
Amazing. So is that what interests you about sharks in particular? You spoke about, your interest in marine biology and loving to just, be in the ocean and play. It's really the world's playground. But what about sharks in particular?
I mean, I think I was honestly drawn to it, to the fact that everyone's afraid. It's like, let me see what is this about? What are these big bad wolves that everyone's talking about? And just try to understand, okay, I understand the people's side. Let me try to understand the shark's perspective.
Amazing. And so, a lot of us, we go to the beach. How close? You said that we enter the homes of the sharks. How close do we get to sharks on the beaches around town?
I mean, not to sound scary, but in the Bahamas, sharks are kind of everywhere, right? People travel far and wide to come to the Bahamas to see sharks. And we should feel quite lucky that we have that, because there's a quote by Sylvia Earle that basically says, we shouldn't be afraid of an ocean with lots of sharks. We should feel afraid of an ocean without them, because that all these top predators and things like that, sharks, they indicate ocean health, and we want to have a healthy ocean, because that kind of in turn means that we as humans are able to have a healthy life as well.
So speak to us a little bit about how a healthy ocean has lots of sharks. Sharks are really predators, and so how does that benefit the ecosystem?
Yeah, so sharks, like you said, they're predators, and a part of their role is to keep the ecosystem healthy. So it's energetically advantageous for sharks to eat sick or injured fish, right? So just like me or you, it's easier to chase down somebody who, they maybe have a sprained ankle than it is to chase down Usain Bolt at his, full capacity. So similarly for sharks, to find a meal that is a little easier to come by is beneficial for them. And so they are crucial in keeping the ecosystem healthy in that way. And in taking out these sick and injured animals, that not only that it basically, it stops disease from spreading, it stops these fish from reproducing and then perhaps passing on a gene that is negative for the ecosystem, things like that, where you really want to have these top predators to keep everything in balance. And also, let's say you have a shark and you've wiped out all the sharks, the next predator in line is going to be the top, right? And then all of a sudden there's going to be some, right? And then all of a sudden of the next predator down, and that's also not what we want to have a balanced ecosystem. And so with that, you need healthy stocks of all of these different species and different trophic levels.
A lot of people are afraid of sharks, and so is the fear really founded? They're not really interested in humans, is that right? Despite the shark attacks that are very sensationalized in the media, humans are not there, at least in the Bahamas and in the Caribbean. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're not what they're interested in.
Yeah, humans are not a part of the shark's diet, but we have these shark bites, and you want to kind of change the narrative and not call it a shark attack, right? It's maybe a negative shark interaction, and sometimes it's brought on by the human. Sometimes I'm standing in the water with a bunch of bait around me. What can I expect? But other times I'm just standing there minding my own business, and that's brought on more by the shark, right? So really, it's just what type of interaction you have with the shark. And so, it's reasonable that people are afraid, because anything that is quite large and has very powerful abilities can be scary. But we have to remember that really the shark is just trying to figure out what is in the environment. It's not saying, oh, there's a snorkeler, I'm hungry. I'm not exactly quite sure what that is. Let me check that out. And the way that they do that is with their face. They bump to try to see what exactly is this. They try to feel that out. And if they aren't really sure, they'll come back in for what's called like an investigatory bite, right? It's not automatically, I'm clamping down to eat you. I'm just like, if I was blind, let's say, I might feel something. The shark is trying to do the same thing, but it just has to do that using its bite.
Are the sharks in the Bahamas different from elsewhere in the Caribbean, or tell us a little bit about the species of sharks that are in this region and in the Bahamas?
So yes and no. I mean, so there are some sharks, like any other animal or plant, that are globally distributed. So, they exist in all oceans all over the world. And then there's some that are regionally distributed. We have here in the Bahamas, we have a high abundance of the Caribbean reef shark. But those exist in other places in the Caribbean. I wouldn't say that we have any species that I personally know of that are only here, but we definitely share a lot of species regionally within the Caribbean, both coastally and in terms of the open ocean.
What are some of the names and characteristics of some of the sharks in our region? So I'm familiar with, you said reef sharks, nurse sharks. The great white sharks are internationally known. Do you find them in our waters at all?
There have never been any known spottings of them, but there has been a sighting in Florida, I know. So, that's obviously quite close to here, so it doesn't rule it out. But we haven't seen one here. But we have a lot of big predatory sharks that are really exciting. We have tiger sharks. We have lemon sharks, oceanic white-tip sharks. So we have great hammerheads. We have a very pretty strong variety of sharks, both in terms of size, in terms of shape, in terms of their feeding strategies, all these sorts of things. We have quite a diverse array of sharks here.
So I love the quote that you shared, that we should really be concerned about the population of sharks as it is a determinant of the health of the oceans. And you've studied this quite a bit. What is the data telling us about sharks in the Bahamas and even regionally? Are they healthy? Do we have a healthy population? Or, what more needs to be done?
Yeah, so sharks here are in good shape, for a short answer. And that's in part because of the great regulations that we have here. And I'm happy to touch on that in a bit if you would like. But some recent studies have shown, there was a study that was recently published that basically compared some surveys that happened before we had any regulatory, any management in place here in the Bahamas. So from 1979 to 1990, that's when those kind of historic surveys took place, compared to surveys done in the exact same manner in 2011 through 2013. And that study found basically that the regulations that we have in place are effective because the populations of sharks compared between those two times remain stable. And that's huge because we know that globally, sharks, 16% of the world's sharks are considered threatened. So that can be whether they're vulnerable, whether they're endangered or they're critically endangered. And that's based on a scale created by the IUCN, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And so we're in a good place, that study showed. Then there's another study that was published very recently this year that did this, it's called BRUVs. They did braided remote underwater video surveys. So basically they have a little contraption that has some bait and a camera attached to it, and they see what sharks and how many of them swim by, basically, in a set amount of time. And this study actually was a global study, and it was done by, led by people in the lab that I am fortunate enough to be a part of. And it found that globally, that the Caribbean, that reef sharks are kind of not looking too good. But the Bahamas is actually doing very well. And like I said before, that's almost entirely because of the strong management strategies that we have here.
So Candace, you spoke about the regulations of sharks in the Bahamas, and it's led to a considerable amount of success. That's great news. How is this? Tell us a little bit about the regulations for those who may not know.
Yeah, so in 2011, the Bahamas, the EEZ of the Bahamas, and an EEZ, for anyone who's not familiar, it means the exclusive economic zone, which basically means the part of the ocean that a country has jurisdiction over, right? So, and I'll add a picture of our EEZ to put up. So our entire EEZ is a shark sanctuary. So what that means is that the law, I'll have to read it to get it right, but the law prohibits the possession, fishing for landing, sale, or export of shark parts, or shark products. So that, very clearly says sharks are safe here, But even before that, which was kind of the initial protector of sharks here, is that in 1993, commercial longlining was banned. So in long lines of that scale, people said miles and miles and miles of hooks. Sharks are often caught as bycatch. So that basically means that if the shark is not the target species. So I'm out there trying to fish for tuna, but I catch lots of sharks accidentally. So that's what bycatch means. And sharks are really vulnerable to to being caught as bycatch. So that's a huge issue, and the banning of the long lines commercially was a major win for sharks. So between that in 1993, and then that decreased the export of sharks dramatically. And then in 2011, where everything was halted, you can't even fish for sharks here. So sharks are really, really in good shape. And there's the Bahamas National Trust is a major player in getting that done, and it's a great organization, and they have a cool little graphic of sharks that say, it just got even better in the Bahamas with some sharks, looking excited because they're now safe here.
Terrific. Fact or fiction?
You could go
sharks.
That's funny.
Are sharks blind?
I've never even heard about that before, but sharks can see. Their eyesight varies from species to species, but and their eyes they're not like us necessarily. They obviously can see better in the dark, all these sorts of things, but they do have the benefit of kind of an additional sense where they have these sensory organs, which help them detect kind of electrical fields. So I guess even if they were blind, they would be kind of okay. Now, there are species that live really deep. So I guess I'll have to rescind my earlier point that I never heard of this, but there are, obviously the deeper you get in the ocean, the darker it becomes, right? After about 200 meters, there's no more light. And so there are some species that, because they live their entire life at such dark depth, they actually don't really need eyes. So they've just evolved to be kind of blind. And then also there's a shark called the Greenland shark. So again, I just fully lied before, it seems, that they are kind of blind, and they have a parasite that lives on their eyes. I can show a picture of this as well. But they're still successful because they rely on all their other senses. So the sight is not the be all end all for sharks, for sure.
We've heard so much about climate change and the warming of the ocean's waters, warming of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Has that affected shark populations at all in the Bahamas or around the world? Have you read anything about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm no expert on this, and I don't have any exact information, but you can imagine that just like any animal that anything is impacted, right? So sharks, they have a ideal temperature. All species, and the ideal temperature will vary from species to species, which allows them to function optimally, whether that means they can swim at their top speeds, they are able to foster pups in their womb better, anything like that. And it's often temperature driven. So you can imagine that with that, if temperatures fluctuate too much, they are going to have a hard time adjusting to that. And further, the life history of sharks also doesn't lend well to drastic change because they have few offspring. They mature sexually late in life. So they can't adapt as quickly to these changes in the environment as perhaps a bony fish that has a better adaptability to these, big fluctuations.
What more could we do to support shark populations in the Bahamas?
I mean, I think that the key is honestly just education. I think that getting as much information about the benefits of sharks in this country out there as much as possible is crucial. We have great management strategies already in place, so that in terms of the governmental level, I would say that we just need to keep stand strong in our management strategies. And just, understand the importance, not only, I talked a little bit about the, ecological impact of sharks, but sharks here also have a huge economic value. Like I said, also people travel far and wide to come here to swim with sharks. And the shark diving industry is a huge, huge part of the economy. Over $100 million annually is generated through this. And you can imagine that. So basically, through that, you can see that a shark is much more valuable alive swimming around here in our waters than it is dead. One individual reef shark, let's say, could be worth $250,000 yearly if you continue to allow it to swim, versus $50 if you kill it. So you just have to really put things into perspective and see that it's not worth it to eliminate these animals for many reasons.
Fascinating. I think the economics of it is just so important that we have to keep drilling that home, that really marine conservation is all of our business.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's beyond sharks. You know, we need to protect our reefs. We need to try to avoid, you know, major dredging and things that impact the seabed and impact coral reefs. We have to really be on top of people for breaking any of our laws. We have to make sure people don't drop their anchors where they shouldn't be, dropping anchors into coral reefs, just destroying them. All these sorts of things just make a huge difference. And it only takes, in my mind, just one person to get that message to the right person, and it's just going to keep, you know, disseminating.
Tell us about the state of coral reefs. You've snorkeled and scuba dived around the country. What does it look like underneath the water?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously was not around in, you know, the thriving times of coral, so I guess my judgment on how things are is a little skewed. But I've definitely just in my own experience seen corals bleaching. So basically, they're losing their color because. So coral is actually an animal, not a plant. A lot of people think coral are plants, but they have a symbiotic relationship with something called zooxanthellae, which is a photosynthetic. It's a photosynthetic algae. So because of that, when the zooxanthellae die, that's what causes the bleaching. So basically, the increase in temperature causes the zooxanthellae to die, and then the coral becomes bleached, and then the coral dies. Because they, you know, rely on these zooxanthellae for oxygen and all this. They just have a good symbiotic relationship. So, yeah, I've seen definitely the negative impacts, but there's a lot of great reef restoration projects that go on here. A lot of good work done out of the Perry Institute for Marine Science, from the Cape Luther Institute, all sorts of places that are trying to foster reef restoration.
You've studied sharks and marine life in many places around the country. Tell us about one of your most unique and fascinating experiences that you've had.
Yeah. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to work at the Cape Luther Institute. You know, I don't know what I think they kind of almost played themselves by allowing me to get that job, because I really had no qualifications to be there, but I'm very thankful that I was given that opportunity. And so I was able to work on a variety of super cool projects with a lot of different scientists, and just meet all sorts of people that have helped lead me to the path that I'm on now. So I just had to have that little plug for the Cape Luther Institute and the Island School, that, you know, I wouldn't really be where I am if I hadn't had that opportunity. So I'm very grateful for that. But through that, like you said, I was able to do a bunch of different cool things. I helped with a project on bycatch deterrence. So we tried to see if these little batteries could deter sharks from taking hooks. I helped with a project that was successfully, you know, I helped them. Well, how should I word this? I helped with the first successful deep sea tagging mission. So the CEI, along with the Ocean X, on the research vessel called the Alusha, they have subs, and they basically strapped a spear gun with a satellite tag attached to it, and was able to tag a blunt-nosed six-gill shark at depth in its natural habitat. You know, and normally to tag these animals, you have to catch them on a long line, and you bring them out of their natural habitat. And so there's kind of this period when they're finished getting tagged of them having to return to their non-stress level. So the idea there was that if you tag them in their natural habitat, we go to them instead of them coming to us, they wouldn't have that, you know, recovery period, and we'd just be able to see what their normal life is like from the first moment. And so that was honestly one of the coolest things I've ever done. Was just to see the success with that. I was able to go to San Salvador to help tag oceanic white-tip sharks, which is where I met the my advisors of my PhD, and I was one of the things I was most involved with was helping one of my mentors and friends with his PhD work, and he's studying silky sharks, where we, would catch them and try to put satellite tags on them to understand their movements, as well as take some swabs, fecal swabs, to try to understand their diet, and all these other samples to help understand their diet. And so it's just, honestly, it's just been super cool. And a part of that, I've helped with other projects, looking at fish aggregation devices and looking at marine mammals like beaked whales and all these things. So it's just been, I've seen lots of cool stuff, swam with lots of cool stuff, met a lot of cool people. Overall, it's just an amazing experience. So I'm very happy to share. And I swam with a whale shark once, so that was also probably the top thing. It felt like a dream, honestly.
So, Candace, right now we're going through a pandemic. We're recovering from Hurricane Dorian. Why should we care about sharks, and why should we care about marine life?
I mean, I think that, like I touched upon earlier, that this country is relying on tourism, right? And like you said, we're obviously struggling right now because of the pandemic. We don't have tourists, and so we should care about sharks, and we should care about the environment, because that's a major draw of tourists here. People want to come and see the beauty of the country. They want to see the beautiful beaches. They want to see the beautiful wildlife that we have here. And so it's important for us to maintain the health of our environment, so that can continue for a lifetime to come. If we just say, oh, it's fine now, it doesn't really matter, everything's fine, then in 10, 15 years we're going to be in a tizzy when all of a sudden people are like, well, there's no need to go there because all the coral's dead. Or if we minimize our shark regulations, then shark diving industry goes away. I'm not going to go to the Bahamas to dive with sharks anymore. So I think for that purpose, and COVID really showed us how important tourism is if we didn't know before. And so really it's really important to keep strong with our conservation narrative, and keep being kind of a key player in the world of ocean health.
What would you say to any young Bahamians who are interested in studying marine biology?
I would say definitely do it. Firstly, I think I want to just so many Bahamians can't swim, and I just think it's swimming is one of the best things you could possibly do. So if you can't swim, learn how to swim, or try to. I think that's something that we can all benefit from as a country. But I would say that, don't be deterred. It's not necessarily an easy path. It's not the most. If you're here to just say, I want to make $5 million, then maybe this field isn't for you. But it's really rewarding. And if you like to work hard and see, you can see like visibly that your work is important, then this is a good field for you.
Candace Fields, thank you so much for joining us at Forward, Upward, Onward Together. If anyone in our viewing audience wanted to reach out to you, where can they contact you?
You can contact me via my email. It's candacefields13@gmail.com, and I'm happy to field any questions or have any sort of discussions that you're interested in.
Thanks again for joining us, Candace. I can't wait to call you Dr. Fields, so continue to do very well in your studies. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Forward, Upward, Onward Together. I'll see you next week.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming, declaring, here to encourage you. No matter the problem, we will enlighten you. We hear you, please listen. There is a point of